Okay, guys, welcome to our next flipped video. I hope you can hear me fine. I'm going to try to talk a little louder this time. Hopefully my microphone picks me up pretty good. Today we are going to talk about adding integers, and you need to make sure that you write down these adding integer rules on your notes. There's two different rules, and it depends on our sign. So today when I say adding integers, I mean that there's going to be a plus sign between the two integers or three integers or four. But when you're adding, you're only working with two at a time. And there's going to be a plus sign in between there. That's what I mean by adding. What you do to answer the problem does include some adding and or subtracting. Okay, so when I say adding integers, I'm referring to a plus sign between the two numbers. We have different rules based on the signs of the integers. If they're negative or if they're positive, the same or different, all that makes a difference on our answer. So let's get going with our definitions, our rules. If they have the same sign, that means they're both negative or they're both positive like you've done your whole life. Then you add the numbers together, so you kind of ignore the sign, you add the numbers, and then you put the common sign in front. So if they're both positive, they remains positive. If they're both negative, add them together, put a negative sign in front. If they're different signs, then what you are going to do is you are actually going to subtract the numbers. And that's because if you think of a number line, the negative is on the left side of 0, the positive is on the right side of 0, so when you add them together, it's how far away from 0 the two numbers are. So you're actually going to subtract the two numbers, okay? And you kind of ignore the sign and do the bigger number minus the smaller number. And you subtract them, and then you use the sign with the greater absolute value. So the one that's farther away from 0. So if you have negative 10 and positive 5, since negative 10 has a bigger absolute value, you're going to use the negative sign. Okay, if you need to pause it, go ahead and pause it. Otherwise, I'm going to switch screens and we're going to do some examples. Our first examples are same sign. Now, I did not put any up with two positive numbers because you guys have been doing that for a long time now. Now, I do not want you guys to use a calculator in tonight's homework or when you're practicing. I really want you guys to practice these without a calculator. You need to understand these rules. So this will be our first lesson with no calculator. So what I'm going to do, and I have negative 54 plus negative 28, since they're both negative signs, I am going to add them together. Okay, now if you can add them together in your head, that's great. If you need to write them out, you can go ahead and do 54 and 28. I'm ignoring the negative signs, and I'm going to add them together, and I'm going to get 82. Okay, now if you can do that in your head, that's fine. You don't have to show that in the red. Okay, now since they're both negative, I'm going to put that common negative sign in front of my answer. So it's going to be negative 82. And that is my final answer. For B, I have negative 2 plus negative 11. And notice I put parentheses around the negative so you can tell the difference between a negative sign and a minus. That's all that the parentheses are doing. All right, so they're both negative, they're common. So I'm going to do 2 plus 11, okay, which is 13. I think we can all do that in our head. And then since they're both negative, it's going to be negative 13. And that is my final answer. Okay, same sign, add them together, ignoring the sign, and then look to see, are they both positive? Stays positive. If they're both negative, you put the negative sign in front. Okay, I always kind of think of money, right? If I owe somebody $2 and I borrow another $11 from them, now I owe them $13. I'm $13 in the hole. I got negative $13. Okay, if you need to pause that to write down these two examples, go ahead. I'm going to go to my next screen. Okay, our next screen is different signs. These are where it gets a little tricky. When you are adding with different signs, you have one positive, one negative. It does not matter which one is positive or which one is negative. All you are going to do is subtract the two numbers. And you can always kind of ignore the sign and just do the bigger number minus the smaller number. So for this first one, I'm going to do 38 minus 17. Again, some of you might be able to do it in your head. But if you need to write it out, that's fine. And you are going to get 21. Now I have to decide if it's positive or negative. Since I have more positives than I do negatives, okay, I have a positive 38. I have negative 17. 38 is a bigger absolute value than 17. That's positive. My final answer would be positive. So 38 plus negative 17 is essentially the same thing as 38 minus 17. Okay, in example B, I have negative 42 plus 28. So again, Negative 42, that's a negative number. 28, that is a positive number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract the two numbers. So I'm going to take 42 minus 28. I'm kind of ignoring the negative sign for now. I'm just subtracting the two numbers. If you can do them in your head, great. These aren't the hardest problems, but I'm just going to go over and review just in case you have to write them out since we aren't using calculators. And you're going to end up with 14. Now I have to decide if it's positive or if it's negative. So I have negative 42, positive 28. 42 is a greater absolute value than 28. The 42 is a negative 42, so my final answer is going to be negative 14. Okay, and that is how you do it with different signs. So same sign, add them together, put that sign in front. Different signs, you are going to subtract them, and then put the sign from the greater absolute value. Okay, if you need to pause that to finish writing it down, you can. Otherwise, I'm going to go to my next slide. Okay, my next slide is evaluating variable expressions. So there would be work, and you do have to show that substitution step. So all I'm going to do with this one is first plug in the number for the variable, and then do the answer. So for the first one here, I'm going to do negative 22 plus negative 9. Again, the only reason I'm putting parentheses around the negative 9 is so you can tell the difference between a plus and then minus later when we get into problems. It makes it a little easier to read. They're both negative, same sign. You got to check that out. Since they're both negative, I'm going to add them together. That's 31. And since they're negative, my final answer is going to be negative. So it's negative 31. For example B, I'm going to plug in negative 22 for x plus 17 plus y is negative 12. I'm going to plug in negative 12. Again, I just put parentheses around it so you know it's a negative 12. Now I'm going to work on this problem. I'm going to work on just two numbers at a time. Negative 22 plus 17. I'm going to ignore the third part right now. And those are different signs. One's negative, one's positive. So I'm going to subtract them. 22 minus 17 is 5. Since I have more negatives than positives, it's going to be negative 5. I'm going to bring down the plus negative 12 because I haven't used that yet. Now I'm going to add these two numbers. They're both negative, so I'm going to add them together. That's 17. 5 plus 12 is 17. Since they're both negative, my final answer is going to be negative, and I get negative 17. Okay? And that's how you do evaluating. You plug in, and you do need to show the substitution steps. So the steps that I'm putting arrows on right now, those steps, you need to make sure you show those on tests and quizzes, and then your answer. If you can do the math in your head, that's fine. I don't need to see you write it out. Okay, and if you need to pause to finish writing that down, go ahead. Otherwise, I'm going to go to the next screen. And in the final screen here, what I've done is I've added two problems that I would like you to do for class to practice. So at the end of your notes, before your summary, before your question, answer these two questions in your notes right now. And then tomorrow in class, we're going to go over them and to see if you understood the lesson. Otherwise, make sure you write your summary and you write a question at the end of this. Remember, your summary only needs to be about four sentences long, kind of rephrasing, rewriting what we did in class. Have a wonderful night, and I will see you all tomorrow in class.